Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Kaleidoscope Maker. As you can see, I moved into a new area, a new studio. It's not a new studio, a new area. It's just a few steps away from my little workbench. I thought this would be much better and easier for me to do the work and show you what it looks like. But anyhow, welcome back. And this time I'm going to show you how to make another kaleidoscope. So here we go. The kaleidoscope I'm going to show you is actually going to be a stained glass kaleidoscope. And there's a number of reasons why I'm doing that. And that is because I wanted to show you how to cut stained glass and then solder stained glass, because a lot of people ask about some techniques and procedures on that. And then I'm showing you how to assemble your mirror and attach a specific type of object for the kaleidoscope. In this case, I'm going to be attaching a 1-inch marble, colored, and I'll go into details on how it's done. But first I'd like to show you how I'm going to cut the mirror and approximately some general dimensions. This is really kind of based upon a Clarity stained glass kaleidoscope kit, which you can order the kit, and it gives you the instructions on how to make it. But it's also a rather common design used by a lot of beginners and actually experienced kaleidoscope artists. I purchased at one time some 1-inch by 7 3/4 inch mirror, a lot of it, and I believe that's what comes in the kit from Clarity, but I'm not too sure. I haven't used it in a long time, the kit, but I've got all these mirrors, so I'm planning on using them up. This would be a good idea and show you how it works, and also it's about the right size for the marble once you assemble them. So again, I'm going to show you how to assemble the mirrors, how to cut and assemble the stained glass, how to attach the marble, and basically how to make a finished scope. Now, hopefully in a future video I'm going to show you how to modify this design to use a different object at the end. If I don't, please remind me to do so, but here we go. I'm going to need to have 3 strips about 1 1/16. I believe that should give me enough of a gap, and you can use either one of the squares that you may have purchased, or you can use whatever method of Morton cutting system, which you'll learn more about later, or even the one we made from a previous episode of the Kaleidoscope Maker. In this case I will use this one because it covers the entire distance. As you see, this one that I purchased doesn't go all the way, and we want to go all the way. So first I'm going to cut the end, which is actually, yeah, it's pretty square. So if I have a different end that's square, which sometimes your stained glass is a little off. Well, that's not too bad. And then I'm going to need to go over about 1 1/16. And again, you may not have the same glass cutter I have. That's alright. This is one that I frequently use. It's got the oil in the chamber. It's got the rotating wheel. It should be rotating. It is rotating. And I need to be off about 1 1/16, which I didn't add my ruler here, as you can see. And that's about 1 1/16 there. Let me double check. And I'll show you in the future how to make something that's much more accurate and easier. But again, I should have added my ruler guide to here, but I didn't. So I'm going to hold that tight. Did you hear that? That's kind of the sound it needs to make. As far as braking goes, you just apply pressure here, or you use a pair of braking pliers. I'm going to just apply the pressure, and you see, there it is. Now on the next one, I'm going to go off about the same thing. 1/16. That was a little bit off on my cutting, but that's all right. Yeah, I'm going to cut that one again. It's a little too far off. I haven't used this method in a long time, so actually what I'm going to do is turn the corner here so I have a shorter piece, not using up as much. It's not quite square, but I will make it square. And I recommend breaking pliers if it's too short. And again, you hear the sound. That was a good cut. Breaks real easily. One and a 16th, which I hope is the correct size, at least for the mirrors I'm using. Pretty good. I'm having problems doing this for some reason. Said I don't use this method too terribly often, but it does work. If these are the tools you have, then it will work fine. You get used to it. And here are our three pieces. They all feel just about correct, same size. And that's the width. Now what we want to do is the length. And to do the length, you can just slap these together, which is fine. And square up the ends. That's pretty good. And so the length needs to be the distance of the mirrors plus the width of a piece of glass, which we're going to use for our eyepiece. We need to have an eyepiece on there, and it's about the same thickness, so I'm just going to put that there, and I'm just going to kind of mark it over here. That's exactly the most accurate method. And just to tell you what that measurement should be, it should be about 7 7/8, or if you want to do it in 16ths, it would be a little bit larger. If you want to make it, you can still make it a little bit longer if you want to. 7 15/16, or if you want to make it 8 inches, you can make it 8 inches. I'm recommending right now, unless I goof up on this one, to be 7 7/8. And we shall take a look and see here. Make sure our ends down here are the same. cut. But I could have actually used the other side, but I'm right-handed, so. Okay. Our 3 pieces of glass. We have our 3 pieces of mirror. By the way, this will be first surface mirror, not regular mirror. This is also a little thin because it's usually purchased thinner than a regular mirror. But you could use regular mirror, but then you have to make your pieces of stained glass a bit larger depending upon the thickness. And there's so many variables you have in kaleidoscopes, but that's part of the fun and problem with making kaleidoscopes. You gotta know how to fit all the pieces together. But when they're all about the same and you got some general instructions, follow them. So I have my 3 mirrors. By the way, this blue side is the protective film for the first surface mirror, for the first surface. This is the second surface or regular mirror side. And again, what I like to do is just so that I know what I'm doing, I like to mark the back side, the side that's going to be pointing out, not the inside. This is not the first surface. This will be the first surface. And another thing I like to do is I like to cover with a marker the end of it so it blocks the light. And that's always a nice thing to do. You can paint it if you wanted to, but now's a good time while you still have the film on to do that. Let me kind of show you. I don't know if you can see that or not, how the light shines through there. Okay, hold it right. Okay, now if I add marker just to one side even, see how that gets blocked? Now if I block the other end, it blocks it even more to where right up against your eye, we don't see very much, see? Okay. And that's basically what I'm doing. Some people didn't know about that trick, but now you do. There'll be many other tricks and techniques that you can learn by coming back and visiting my Yahoo pages and learning how to do this from a professional who's willing to share the secrets. Okay? So now, another thing I could do is I could go ahead and foil this edge. Or what I can do is grind it. And I do like to grind my edges because, first of all, this edge has already been ground. As you can see, it's a little rough here. A little rough right there. And I'm sorry about that. I bumped my table. And this is shiny. Means it hasn't been ground. If you grind it, and you can grind it on concrete, by the way, if you don't happen to have a grinder. Be careful though, try not to cut yourself. But it makes the foil stick a little bit better, and it does a better job with the scopes, and it's also better to handle because these edges are can be quite sharp. But that also smooths off or roughens the edges so that the foil would stick. So now I'm going to go ahead and do some grinding, bring some foil, show you how to foil, and then I'm also going to show you how to solder. So hang in there. Well, I got the glass ground on the edge all the way around on all 3 pieces, and then what I'm going to do is foil. And I've shown you this foil before in a previous episode. This is designed for stained glass. It's stained glass foil, it's what it's called. It's just basically an adhesive piece of copper. One side's adhesive, which has this wrapper on it. The other side is just copper foil. And as you can see here, it splits apart. And then what I want to do is get 3 pieces that go completely around my piece of glass and overlap some. So there's 1, 2, and there's various ways to do the foiling. Different people have different procedures. Some are fast, some are slow, some are just average. Depends upon what you're into, how often you do this, and other stuff. There's also various thicknesses of foil, and I forget what this one is. I don't have it marked. but I like it because it's a little thicker. It gives you a little bit more flexibility in it. This is 1/4 inch. And they have smaller. But I'm using 1/4 inch. And what I'm going to do is take a piece and again, with foiling and stained glass, you want to put your foil when it overlaps in the joint, in actually a joint where pieces are going to get together. So in other words, I'll be soldering these pieces together like this. So I do not want it to end out here on the outside edge. It's alright, you'll be soldering there as well, but it's better if it ends right someplace where you're going to actually have two pieces of glass touching. And so I'm just going to do it right here in the middle. And I tried to put this right along the center of the foil. There's even devices that'll help you do this if you want to buy them. I do it by eye. And I apologize, this does get to be a little bit boring, but that's alright. If you learn how to do it, you're learning how to do it. And I have a little bit too much overlap, but that's alright. Better have too much than too little. Okay? And there it is. Now what you need to do is you need to press it down. Some people press it down on the edge and then press it on the side. Some people go around and just press it down on the side and then come back, and either way is fine. But you do need to come back and do what's called burnishing. What that means is rubbing. And you want to rub this foil up against the glass. You can use even your Sharpie or a pencil or piece of wood you want, and you rub it along the side. Make sure it gets nice and rubbed in. Okay. Now I usually like to go all the way around doing that. And then what you want to do is you also want to push in at the edges, corners, okay, and then you want to burnish the top and bottom of it, which means you rub along the edge. And hopefully you can see that here. This is a burnished edge right here. This is not burnished. You see how it's sticking up. What happens when you rub it, it wants to stick to the glass, which is what you want to have happen. So I'll go ahead and I'll just finish burnishing it, or simple term, rubbing it down. Flip it over and do the other side as well. Again, piece of plastic, pen, pencil, a stick. They do have devices such as these, if you're going to do a lot of them, that pushes the foil against the edge and burnishes at the same time. You just squeeze it and it does a real nice job. It's a lot faster, but you can wear these things out. And that's how you do it. You just go along the edge like that and you hold it and pinch it. Okay. And then there's devices where you roll it through and everything else, and types where you have a roller that you roll on it. All good. So now I'm going to do the other two, and we'll have this stuff ready to assemble the box. Okay, now I have my three pieces of body. It's called a body tube, and it will be a tube once we assemble it, but body. And sometimes bodies aren't necessarily tubes. I hate to say it, but body. And I did not do a perfect job right here, as you see my foil, but I don't care. It's not any particular thing. You can work real hard to make them perfect, or you can trim that if you want to. And we have our three mirrors with the sides still protected. And now the next step is to go ahead and solder this together, which is really why I want to make a stained glass kaleidoscope. So I can show you various methods of dealing with some issues that people have with excuse that, I'm right by the laundry here, but it sounds nice, doesn't it? Deal with some of the issues that people have when they work with stained glass, especially kaleidoscopes, because you do want to keep the inside pretty well clean of any unnecessary particles, of which solder can become one of those unnecessary particles. So what I'm going to do is show you how to do some soldering and show you some methods to use to make it easier, make it better, whatever you want. And here we go. I do want to let you know that when you are working with glass, cutting it and grinding it and soldering it, you do want to have definitely some eye protection. I'm wearing safety glasses right now, which you can't see, but I am wearing glasses. And sometimes I'll even wear gloves depending on what I'm working with. I'm actually cautious. You can get gloves that help you work with glass and don't cause a problem. And you do want to make sure that when you're soldering, you have something to, if you're cautious and you know what you're doing, you're alright, but if you're not, and you're new with it, you might want to wear some gloves. But anyhow, enough said about safety. Always, when you're working with kaleidoscopes, with anything you're doing, be sure to understand the safety rules of the equipment you're using and the materials you're using and the methods you're using. I'm sorry, you have to take care of yourself and what you're working with and what you are doing. So with that said, I'll continue. What we're going to do is we're going to assemble the mirrors, and I've got two sides. I've got flat side black, which doesn't have anything on it, but I've got a more interesting side, which hopefully you can see here how it's got, there it is. It's got a little bit of not dichroic, well I guess it is dichroic, but it's got a pattern to it. And you can see here that I didn't quite get that. Adhered correctly. It can come off if you don't have it adhered correctly. And okay, good enough. And what we're going to do is we're going to do with that interesting side. Try to get it up here again. We're going to have it turned into a triangle like this, and you see this is hard to hold, and that's fine. It is hard to hold, and that's why in future videos I'm going to show you some neat mechanisms to help you hold your body tubes and shape jigs or whatever you want to call them, to make it easier for you to assemble, especially if you're going to assemble a lot of them. You want something to hold them nicely. Now I could just sit here with a rubber band, slip it on there, hopefully hold that tight. The other option is using some tape and taping the edges where you want them. And both of these will work. They're not perfect, but they will work. Now, what I'm going to do is go ahead and show you how to solder. Now, normally when you solder something, you try not to get anything on the inside. You do sometimes, and that's fine, but you try not to. And one of the things you'll find out is that when you're doing these seams, they're not always perfect. Sometimes there's variation in glass, and sometimes there's variation in what you do and how you assemble, but the solder can flow down in here. So typically what you want to do is you want to do some little passes, and your first pass is what I call tacking. Now again, if you haven't soldered, you better learn how to solder. This is not really an instruction on soldering. Hopefully I'll do one later, or you can find out how to solder stained glass online or whatever, but I'm using a flux method. Now I'll get these where I want. Now flux an area, and hopefully my soldering iron is ready. Looks like it is. And everybody has different opinions and ideas on how to deal with soldering iron, but I'll get this piece about where I want it, and I'll tack it. It's just a little piece of solder. See that right there? And it's tacked both sides together. And then I'll come down, I'll even take my rubber band off. And I'll come down to the other end Add my flux. A little bit of solder. Some put it on here, some apply the solder to the thing. Different people have different methods. All right, all wrong. Benefits to each. And then in the middle, I'll also tack it. Alright, now we got to start of our kaleidoscope. Now what I will typically do is go ahead and start tacking the other sides. Some people do, some people don't. Sometimes they'll just go ahead and finish the method of assembly on one side, but that's up to there. But here I'm going to show you another method on how to deal with it. Again, I'm going to tack first. Go down to the other end, and you try to keep, in this case as you're working with, you try to keep your ends square with each other or flat with each other, same distance, because hopefully at the end you won't have any problems. And I think my flow's a little bit old, which it probably is. Okay, got a little extra on this one. Alright, now on this last side I'm actually going to describe to you a method to keep your solder from falling down into the kaleidoscope. And I would use a thinner piece of foil for doing this, but this will show you the idea. And what I will do is I'll go ahead here and I will kind of tear it about the length I need, or you can cut it, either way. And this way I'm going to create a how do I want to say this, a seam, a barrier for the flux to get down into the bottom. And again, you want to have something thinner than what I'm using now, but this will still show you the idea. And what you want to do is you want to kind of bend it in half lengthwise. And be careful, you can get cut real easily with this stuff. This has happened to me a number of times. And as a matter of fact, you may want to bend it while it's still on the backing. But this is a method that has been used by some stained glass artists and some kaleidoscope artists when you're working with three-dimensional objects. Not saying it's good, not saying it's bad. It has its benefits and it has its drawbacks, which all these methods do. So then you place it right down in the seam. And you find an object to press it down in there. Now, let me tell you, this will stop, as you can see there, this will stop flux from falling down inside your kaleidoscope. Not saying it's wrong, not saying it's right. You still have to burnish it. In this case, if by using too large of a piece, it actually overlaps on the edge. Now, this method does do an excellent job of keeping the flux from falling into your kaleidoscope. An excellent job. However, it is actually a little weaker than the other methods. In this case, I'm going to take care of the sides because I have got too large of a piece. If it's smaller, it stays within the seam. And I like to reflux the area again. Now, that is not going to fall down inside the kaleidoscope. Okay? It's one method. Right. Now on one of the other two sides, the normal method, which not saying again it's right or wrong, but you have to be careful. And I'm going to flux it all again. Is to go ahead and do little light solders. Add a little bit of solder. Okay. And then you let it set. Now this side I can keep working at it and I keep adding more and more and more, which I will do. But this side, and here I'm going to show you by looking in there, hopefully you can see that. This side was the one side I did. Hopefully if it focuses in there, you can see that there is no solder in there on that edge. There we go. But the side without, hopefully you can see in there that it has some little bubbles or drips in there. I'm going to have to do something better about this. See, it actually seeped in there a little bit. By looking in here, I can see a little bit of that. But that's alright. It didn't get too much and shouldn't interfere with the scope too badly. Now, the other alternative is, again, a trade-off. It's good and bad. This one's a little harder. It's like the first one where I went ahead and added a strip. And what I'm going to do is add the strip to the inside, and actually I want one that's longer than the scope because it's easier to handle that way. And then you want to bend it along its length. Okay. And then you take it off of this. I'm not saying it's easy because it isn't. And then you put it inside along the seam that you're wanting to cover. If you're real lucky, it will fit in there, and then you can start to open it up and burnish it down, which usually a thin stick or rod will work really good. I'll be back when I get paint. A wooden skewer would actually work real good. And I'm going to have to open this up here at this end just a little bit. Okay. Put it back down in there. And what this does will give you the opportunity of protecting the inside of the scope from solder. What this does is kind of burnishes it down in there, and it's a little hard to do. You really have to work at it. And a little metal rod might be nice to help force it into place. Various ways and methods to do this, but or you could actually do this before you assemble the scope, which is another way to do it. Then you just take off the ends, and that should help protect the inside here from any possible flux coming in. And again, I recommend you figure out a method that works for you or that you feel comfortable with. Again, the basic soldering technique of just foiling and soldering works very well for quite a few people. So there are a couple of methods that you can use to reduce the spill of solder inside your kaleidoscope. Okay, and now the last thing you do is you just go ahead and finish up your scope by finishing up your soldering. And you're only soldering the joint edges. You're not soldering the ends yet, because we're going to add some more here in a minute. You're just doing the edges of the glass together. And then I'll show you what the next steps are. Alright, and it gets boring, but there's various techniques to create decorative solder, which again is not part of this lesson, but you can learn how to do it. And perhaps maybe in a future episode I'll show you how to do decorative soldering. But for right now, I just want to show you how to assemble a kaleidoscope and solve some difficulties with solder dripping inside. So with a little bit of work, you make your seams as clean or as decorative as you want. I just basically finish filling in things. I'm not trying to make it perfect by any means. But the inside should be relatively clean. Again, the one side which did not have the seam covering it has some little tiny bubbles in it, and they're hard to get rid of. But if you have some, you can try shoving your soldering iron down in here and straightening them out, but sometimes it works. But there is a neat little trick here. Sometimes you can pull them back out by actually pulling the solder back away. And it causes what's inside to melt and drip back out, but then you have to resolder the joint. And I'm actually doing a pretty good job of getting those things back out of there. I know you can't see it, it's hard to see when I show it to you, but you heat up your joint connection, and then the solder on the inside will actually pull to the outside, and that's not a fun way to go or a fun thing to have to do, but it does work to clean it out. The other best thing would be not to get it so precise that your mirrors fit in there almost perfectly. You want to have a little extra room for your mirrors. I did make this a little tight, and we'll find out how well that works. But that does end up pulling the solder back, but then you gotta let it cool. You gotta reflux it and resolder it, and hopefully you don't solder it in enough that the solder flows down inside. Just want to cover it in small, thin little batches, and then not heat it too much. Thermostat on your soldering iron is also a good investment if you're making kaleidoscopes of this type, and you don't want to have to use either one of the two methods. And that's an idea. The other thing is setting it to, when you do you set it low enough that it just kind of melts the area you want to work on and not cause it to be too much. Somebody once made a comment that making a perfect seam on a kaleidoscope or any piece of stained glass is a sign of somebody who actually has a lot more skill than people who do the decorative stuff, because decorative stuff usually covers up mistakes. But anyhow, you try not to touch this because this is hot, and I have got a lot less bubbles on the inside. So there's a couple of the techniques you can use dealing with the solder coming down inside. Dealing with the flux, you just have to clean it up. That's all there is to it. Now I do need to make an eyepiece, which in this case I'll just cut it out of clear. And then the other thing we want to do is we want to solder on our split ring down here at the end to hold our marble. Okay, and as a matter of fact, I recommend you probably go ahead and go to 1 1/8 or 1 1/4 inch for your width of this tube. This might be a little too tight. Yeah, do an inch and an 1/8, 1 1/4, and that'll cause this ring to actually fit a little bit better on there as well. For these 1-inch mirrors, the 1 1/16 is not going to work, so you want to make that bigger. And so I'll make another one. It's fine with me. I can cut these things thinner, or I can make another one. Don't mind making another one. And it'll hold the mirrors in place, and then I can go ahead and show you how to solder up the rest and finish up this kaleidoscope. So again, the recommendation is to make this an inch, probably 1.25 inches. Try 1.25 inches instead of 1 1/16, because that's way too close. 1 1/8 inches probably wouldn't work either. But hey, I make mistakes once in a while, and the more mistakes I make, the less mistakes you'll make, because you'll probably learn from mine. Well, I went ahead and put together another one to show you. This really should be an 1 1/4 inches in width as opposed to the 1 1/16. I was way off, but I kind of did that also to give an excuse to show you another method to help prevent the seeping of the solder into the inside. But I decided to actually hold that off for another video, because I'd actually like to do more general ones, and that seemed to me like it'd be better to put onto another video. But at this point in time, I went ahead and actually made 2. And the reason why I did that was I was going to show you how to use this basic design to make other types of kaleidoscopes. In this case, I'm going to turn this one into the marble scope, and I'm going to show you that. And what I'm going to do is get the split ring, and I'm going to split it open. And I usually use a pocket knife. Again, be careful when you're doing this work, and be careful of your tools. Hopefully I'm buying a pocket knife. And use the appropriate precautions and everything else for doing this. But you get it open. And this is kind of hard. And then you bend it open, which is actually a little harder. I actually had a sticker device that I would use to do it with. And you want to bend it, I don't know if you can see that, about like that. Big enough to slip your marble in, not too tight. That may be actually a little too tight. And you don't want it too loose. See, if it's too loose, the marble just falls out. You just want to snap in there easily and snap out easily. And you do it with the split section. I don't know if you can see that there. See where the split section is? That's where I bend it at the split section. Alright, and then the next thing you do is you place it onto your scope. And the 1.25", this fits on there nicely. And you make a choice on however you bend it, which one you prefer. Different people have different opinions where that split should be. 45 degrees or so. And what we're going to do is we're just going to solder that onto this end. And again, we need to flux the ring, flux our copper. Again, this is standard practice for any stained glass work. Hopefully I don't burn myself while holding this thing. We need to just tack it down, make sure it's kind of equal in all the parts. My soldering iron hasn't warmed up yet. And the sound you hear in the background is actually my laundry. Okay. Now, we try not to get any on the inside here, or as little as possible, because that's where the marble's going to sit. So we don't want to have a big glob there holding the marble up, but still you want to get the key ring situated. So you can see I've got it attached there. Now here's one of the things that I recommend. It's not mandatory, but I do recommend you cover up these little holes because they will let light in to the kaleidoscope. And you can either cover them up by using, by taking a piece of foil and putting it across there and soldering it, or my preferred method is actually cutting some brass, a little triangular piece of brass to fit in here, and then solder that in place. And it works really good with the brass. But just to show you, I have this handy. Put a piece on here. And I got some flux in my fingers now. And then again, there's various techniques on how people do this. Some may do it differently and complain about the way I'm doing it. I may complain about the way that they do it. But there's a lot of room in this world for all kinds of stuff. Now what I'm going to do is again flux and solder so it tacks into place. And in this particular case, I'm going to again use a sharp knife and cut off the extra. Now you again don't have to do this. If you're adding an ornament to the corner, that's fine. You can add the ornament to the corner and cover it up. You see I'm just trimming it along with the other. When you do this, use probably instead of a pocket knife. I try to keep mine sharp. Use one of those hobby knives. It works so much better. Then we're going to finish it up. For this part, there's still one more piece left to do. And I'm going to let you know, I did go ahead and buy the kit, so I'm not stealing this from Clarity or one of the stained glass shops, you know, and keeping them from making their money. I did buy the kit, and I'm sorry I did not read the instructions. To tell you, it's 1 1/4 inches. So they've done so many of these for various many people. Thought I had it memorized, and I didn't. And if you like doing decorative solder, you can add as much decorative soldering to this as you want. I'm just trying to show you how to make a kaleidoscope using this thing. And there, as you see, hopefully I'm bringing it closer and it'll focus. There, as you see, I've covered up those spots. Okay. Now the last step is to put your mirrors in here and to actually put an eyepiece in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show you that step, but I'm first going to go ahead and clean this whole thing off. I don't want any flux inside because it can eat away the mirror. You don't want that. So I'm going to clean this whole thing off. And then when I go ahead and bring the eyepiece to solder it on here, I'm going to be careful about how much flux I use on here and how I attach that. And there's a variety of ways, again, on how you attach that, and I'll just show you one of them. But there's a variety of ways which I can describe. And we'll be back for the next step. Next step is to add an eyepiece. Hopefully you can see that. And it's clear glass. You want to make sure you keep it clean. I'm having troubles with my fingers a little dirty. There's a variety of ways to solder this on. Some people attach the solder just right to the top of it and to the edge of your kaleidoscope, and that should hold it, especially if you have the mirrors in there. That should help hold it in place. Some people actually go ahead and foil the edge and do that, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to foil the edge. But here's a neat little secret. Since this is clear and this is, they actually have silver backed. This is not silver backed, this is copper backed. So instead of doing it right on the center, I'm going to do it to where the top has a little bit extra, so that you don't see, well, you could see it if you really looked at a strong angle, but you'll see less of the copper foil showing back on the non-soldered side. If you cover it up with a little bit more of the foil on the top side. And I doubt if you can see what I did, but I actually added more foil to the top than I did to the bottom. And also when you fix this, in this particular case, I included in the measurements to where this fits inside down into, so this will be flush on top. You could actually have this piece to where it sits on top, in which case this will be the same dimension as the mirror length. This will be the same length. I had a little extra to cover for this to be placed inside. And again, if you have confusions, text me or something, or contact me and I will describe it in more detail. But again, in kaleidoscopes there's sometimes so many options for you that it can drive you crazy. And again, you hear in the background the laundry, which is fine. And so I have it foiled, but now my problem is, since I've got this ring on this end, and I'm going to put on my end piece right now, I can't do that because I haven't got my mirrors put in there. And yes, you need to get your mirrors in there. And what I'm going to do is, again, I usually go into a lot deal of cleaning these after I take the foil or the covering off, because this adhesive can actually pick up the dust and dirt that may collect in here. But this is relatively protected since I covered up the end and put the marble in there. But again, peeling the plastic off. I do recommend cleaning them, and I'm not going to. I'm sorry. And again, the back side, the outside I've marked, and the first surface side is the side which I have here, which I want to make sure the first surface side is in. Now, I do not have these designed for overlapping, which we'll talk more about the overlapping of mirrors later. And for right now, I'm just going to use foil to stick my mirrors together. Again, there's procedures and methods you can use to make sure that these are at the correct angles and everything else. And again, I'm making sure that the marked side is on the outside. And this one just a little bit too long. There we go, it's at the end now. Tear off a little bit more to connect it. And again, you want to make sure that you have consideration for your, everything's falling apart, for your adhesives in your body measurements. Hopefully this is not too tight. I think I've got it measured fine to where it's not too tight. And yeah, this can be a dull, boring thing to watch, but you get to see somebody in action putting together their kaleidoscope mirrors. And I want to make sure that they are flush on both ends. And that will help hold it. And then what I want to do is, again, I like this. I like to cover up the edges because it does help block the light in case some light slips in. In this case, it should not happen, but just in case. You want to spend a little bit of time making sure that the angles stay consistent, and it's a little hard to do, but you can get there. Again, if I spend a lot of time doing this, it will take up the rest of the video, but be careful not to crunch your mirrors too badly. I'm trying to make it perfect. But anyhow, so here we go with the last side. Again, I usually like using that larger silver tape. of duct tape, but this works fine for this. Other people use other methods and other materials to keep their seams together. Okay, now this should be able to fit down inside of here. If it's too loose, I can add some felt pads or some other material around this, or I can even add, depending on how it fits, a few more of these foil things, but this should fit. Oh, it fits just perfect. Did you see that? Let me do that again. You not want to come out here. Yeah, see? There it goes. So I push it down in there. Alright. Now, what I want to do is I want to put the eyepiece in. And I did cut it so one side fits a little bit better than the other one. Okay. And again, you want to be with the larger side up. I just made that mistake. There it goes. Again, I want to be careful not to get too much flux down in there. So generally, I usually lightly flux it. Okay, hopefully this is still focusing here. Just lightly, not adding any extra to my brush. And I try not to push it down in there. And then I go ahead and solder it. Or again, I will take a piece of the foil, usually thinner width foil, and put it across here. Hope you can see what I'm doing there. Put it across there. Cover up those seams like you would on the side, and do it that way, which it will work. Now the next step is to get the soldering iron and some solder. And tack it. And since I got my mirrors in here, I'm now basically finishing up. Because if you do this without having your mirrors in there, there's no way you're going to get your mirrors in there. You can't slip them through that small hole there. It just won't work. And you keep adding a little bit more and a little bit more. You see, I'm not going back and adding any extra flux because I'm trying to avoid putting too much flux on it. And I'm trying to fill in the holes, cover them up. Now again, you may have to come back and add a little bit more flux, and again, I say lightly do it. Don't add any extra. I didn't add any extra to this brush at all. And you don't overdo the soldering on this point either. Just basically get enough on there to fill in small spots. You can keep going back over it. Okay, as you see, I'm starting to make some progress there. Okay, and I'm going to keep adding solder. Making sure I don't put too much because I just want to cover up the holes. Not drip down inside. Again, you wouldn't have as much problem if you did that strip of foil over it. So now again, I'm going to get it. Go ahead and add some more, and now here's where I'm going to finish up my what you call decorative soldering. It's really not that decorative. And everybody has their own soldering technique that they're familiar with and comfortable with. All right, there you go. That's the soldered on Kaleidoscope. Hopefully I've got enough flux in there, or foil or anything else, and it looks really clean on the inside. Of course, I made sure that my glass was clean before I put it in here. Now I need to clean it again. Okay, and using some Windex will help, which I have down here, but right now I'm not going to worry about it. But I'll show you what it looks like, and I apologize for the there's a little bit of moisture caused by heat inside this Kaleidoscope, which it will clear out. But there you go, there it is without the marble in it. See that? Now, once I snap the marble in there, see how easy that was? Just like that. And you can turn the marble, and here we go. There it is with the marble in it, and turning the marble. And as you see, these are live kaleidoscopes, real ones. Stuck right in front of you, not fake ones, not computer generated. But I also wanted to show you something else. This basic design, instead of doing the ring and the marble, I could go ahead and solder on the eyepiece. And I have another one here to show you that's not assembled. And then put the mirror in. But the reason why I'd want to do that is because they have these kits that you can buy, and again, you can get them from Clarity, where it has a threaded rod. It has a threaded rod, which you can see here, and it has an end cap, which you can screw right on the end, and it has these rivet, whatever. And on these you can make stained glass in a circle and solder various colors together, and then put this in the middle, and it'll slide over that thing. So what I could do is I could actually solder this rod right here, as you see, at the point where this is on here, and I want to give it just a little bit of gap to play. And this will be where a wheel comes on. Okay, so I would solder this on here right now. Then I would take this off, and that off, and I would finish up soldering. I would leave this typically open because that would help protect, or again I could use a thin piece of glass. But the farther your object is from your mirrors, the more your image is less symmetrical and cohesive. Different ways to say it. But anyhow, so again, you'd solder this on here and you're finished soldering, and then you could build your ring of stained glass or square or any other shape you want, as long as it covers up the end, covers up this area as it rotates. Alright? And then you'd finish soldering with this on here, and you'd make it all nice and neat. Then you'd slide your mirrors in here, and then you just take your other stained glass piece, wheel, slide it on here, and then you'd screw this on the end like this, and you'd have another finished kaleidoscope using the same basic design and same mirrors. Now, yes, Clarity sells another kit. Okay, it has 2 glass circles. Alright, and again, Clarity, I'm talking about the company that manufactures these. You can buy these through almost any of your stained glass shops or any stained glass retailers. You can order them online, whatever. But they have these wheel kits, which come with their own little hub, which slides in there. And then it has another one to fit the other side. And on this one, what you do is you put little thin objects in here, like flowers or butterfly wings, which I'm not telling you to go kill a butterfly to put in here, or anything else that's thin, or even pictures, or slides from old 35 millimeters. And then what you do is put them in there, and you solder this hub right here. You do not get any on the inside. And then you could foil the outside and make it decorative again, or you could just leave it open. I'd recommend you foil because it does protect whatever's in here. And again, you want to do protection with your objects and your object chambers. So that's another option. This, by the way, does not fit this. It's too big. So in this case, I'd buy a brass rod, and I would fit it on here, probably a threaded brass rod. And I would do the same thing like I did with this. I'd find a little cap that fits on the end of it, and I just fix it so it goes up to the point where it fits, and that's it. Some people even go so far as to take this, and what they do is they expand it and put their objects inside. And as you see, this will go all the way up through there, and will let you have a quarter of an inch. Looks like about a quarter of an inch gap in there. See that? And you can then solder this on the other side of it. Okay. However, you can also go to your hardware store and buy these that are longer. So you can make this however thick you want, and it's a rotating wheel. Some people even go so far as to go ahead and mount a little hub to seal this off, not the hole, but seal up the center, and an outside piece so that you can make this a liquid filled chamber. I'm not going to cover this right now, maybe in a future video, but there are a variety of things you can do with these kaleidoscopes. But again, what I wanted to emphasize was the fact, by buying additional items, or again in this case the hubs with for the stained glass wheels, you can take this same kaleidoscope, this marble scope, make the same body, put a marble on one end, next one you go ahead and you put your wheel on the end, make another one, and put the glass container on the other end. So by making one, you've made a whole series of them. There's even more you could do with this, but that's for you to learn later. So if you have enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends. I made a mistake, I admitted it, but everything turned out nice, and actually makes a very pretty kaleidoscope. And yes, the marbles are interchangeable. Okay. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this new version of the Kaleidoscope Maker. I think this is what, number 5. I hope you like my new digs. I plan to continue working on making them better, and hopefully reducing some of the sound of laundry and air conditioner and other noises. But it's still working, and it's pretty good, and I'm enjoying the new location. I like the table, and I will continue to do more of these. Please give me your ideas. Love ideas for what you want to have covered. I love questions. Please ask questions. If there's something that you want to tell me that I can describe on these videos, I'd be glad to. And there's so much more that I can cover, but I want to cover something that you enjoy, that you want to know, that you like, and I'll be glad to. I did have a suggestion from one of the viewers that I make a kaleidoscope that shows you what the image looks like as it varies from 180 to almost 0 degrees difference between the mirrors. He didn't say 0, but I actually am planning on doing that. Now let me explain this. I'm not going to do it right away. There are various parts I'm going to have to put together and make, and I plan to show you all the processes of making this one particular kaleidoscope and then doing what he wants with the end result. I'm not guaranteeing I'm doing it right now. It's something I'm hoping to work on. But first of all, what I'd like to do is in the future, near future, probably show you how to make an automatic turning object chamber that you can use for like a webcam, because I have a webcam running, and I'm not going to tell you where it's located. It's been running for over a decade, almost 2 decades now. Not quite, because 1995 is when basically the internet became popular. But you know, getting close to 15 years easily. It's still running, but I'm going to probably take it out of service and replace it with this new one that I want to build, and I'm hopefully going to show you how to do that. But there's going to be some other videos in the meantime I'm going to show you. I enjoy doing kits. If there's kits you want to do, like this is basically a kit. Remember, clarity. Find it in your local stained glass shop or dealer, or go online to one of the stained glass stores and buy it there or whatever, and then feel free to make it. And I may do other kits from Clarity and other people, but please come back. I'm glad to have you here, and I'm enjoying this. I love kaleidoscopes. I love making kaleidoscopes. Unfortunately, it does cost a lot of money. First surface mirror is expensive, and stained glass is expensive, and solder is expensive. Got it at Hobby Lobby. 15 bucks. Used up half of it already on just a couple kaleidoscopes. Sorry. There's other place I can get it cheaper or different, whatever. But anyhow, and the electricity and the lights and the time spending on it, and you know, it costs money. Right now I'm not asking for money. Perhaps in the future I'll have to. I'd love to be able to make some profit or make some money at this so I can keep doing it. But whether or not I do or not, I'll probably still keep doing this stuff because I just enjoy kaleidoscopes. So anyhow, please let me know what you want to see, and I'll be coming back soon with another video. I'm glad you like this one, so thank you. Bye.